My stepbrother stole my laptop, failed college using it, and blamed me. So I tanked his entire reputation in one night. Before any of this started, I lived a quiet, structured life. I wasn't the most social kid, nor did I crave attention. I spent most of my teenage years buried in books and building things on my laptop, from programming little puzzle games to crafting stories I never had the guts to show anyone. It wasn't glamorous, but it was peaceful. My dad and I were close. He'd been raising me alone since I was 6, after my mom passed away. Our bond was simple but strong. We had routines, traditions, and this unspoken understanding that we had each other's backs. That stability shattered the year I turned 16. Dad met Sharon at some conference for work. She was polished, successful, and exactly the kind of woman people looked up to in public, the type who knew how to dress, how to smile, how to make you feel like you should be grateful just to breathe her air. But behind that facade, she was cold, calculating, and subtly cruel. Sharon didn't like things she couldn't control, and I was one of those things. She moved in less than a year after they met, bringing her son Jake with her. Jake was the same age as me but acted like he was auditioning for a reality TV show. He had the attitude of someone who peaked in middle school and never recovered. Loud, obnoxious, always needing to be the center of attention. He was the kind of guy who turned every group project into a one-man disaster. And yet, somehow, teachers liked him. Girls liked him. Adults believed in his charm. Sharon encouraged that. She'd say things like, "Jake just needs structure," or, "Boys like him are natural leaders." Meanwhile, I was invisible. She constantly referred to me as the quiet one, or worse, acted like my silence was a symptom of something broken. If I ever tried to voice concern about Jake, I was brushed off. "He just needs time to adjust," she'd say, even as he was stealing my clothes, breaking my headphones, or snooping through my drawers. Dad, for a while, was blind to it. Sharon was his second chance at love, and I couldn't blame him for wanting to be happy. But with every passing month, the house changed. Our traditions vanished. Our routines died. Sharon took over everything. She controlled what we ate, how we spent holidays, even where we could hang things on the walls. It went from our home to her curated magazine spread. Sharon and Jake didn't just move into our home, they took it over, piece by piece. At first, it was subtle. Dinners went from quiet meals with Dad to noise-filled sessions in front of the TV, with Sharon controlling the remote and Jake monopolizing every conversation with stories so wildly exaggerated they felt like stand-up routines. My father, once attentive, faded into the background. He laughed when Jake laughed, nodded when Sharon spoke, and slowly, almost invisibly, stopped checking in on me. Jake made himself at home in every part of my life. At school, his charm worked like a spell. Teachers adored him. Girls followed him. Even when he joked at my expense or sabotaged my work, he was just being a teenager. He played the part of the golden boy so well that no one noticed when he planted rumors that I cheated on a test, or worse, when he started taking credit for my ideas. At home, it was worse. My bedroom, my last safe place, became just another room for him to invade. He'd hang out in there when I was gone, scroll through my things, even rearrange my shelves because he thought they looked too neat. I tried locking the door. Sharon said that was antisocial, and Dad removed the lock to keep the peace. Every little piece of me, every inch of space, every shred of privacy, was under siege. He started small. Borrowed my charger without asking. Took my books and forgot to return them. Then he escalated. He found my private writing folder once, printed out a story I'd been working on for months, and read it out loud to his friends, laughing at every line. I still remember walking into the room and hearing my words twisted into a joke. I wanted to disappear. Dad tried to keep the peace, but he wasn't the same anymore. Sharon was always whispering in his ear about how boys fought, about how I needed to toughen up. I coped the only way I knew how, retreating further into my projects. My laptop became my sanctuary. It wasn't just a piece of hardware, it was the only space that still belonged to me. I poured everything into it. Schoolwork, creative writing, apps I was building for fun, even early versions of my college applications. It held years of my effort and ambition. I built that machine myself. Upgraded the RAM, soldered in a cooling system, backed up my files religiously, encrypted the important stuff. It wasn't just a device. It was my workshop, my journal, my vault. And more than anything, it was mine. So when Jake stole it, he didn't just cross a line. He detonated everything. It started on a rainy Wednesday, the kind of day where the clouds hang low and everything feels heavier than it should. I got home late from school, soaked to the bone because Jake had accidentally taken my umbrella again. When I walked into my room, I knew something was wrong. The desk chair was slightly off-center, the mousepad turned sideways. My laptop, which I always kept in its case, was out, open, powered on, and humming. I froze. Jake had found a way past my password. I don't know how long he'd been trying, but clearly he'd succeeded. Maybe he guessed it, maybe he saw me type it in once. Either way, he was in. At first, I thought he'd just snooped. Violated privacy, yes, but not destroyed anything. Then I opened my email. Drafts were missing. Files were moved. My inbox had new outgoing messages, dozens of them. My resume, applications, even my personal essays, all sent to emails I didn't recognize. It took me a few days to piece together what had happened. Jake had been submitting my work, my apps, my essays, my coding projects, to contests and college programs. Under his name. Worse, he was getting attention for it. He showed Sharon an email congratulating him on his brilliant essay on the psychological implications of digital isolation. It was mine. Word for word. A piece I'd spent 3 months revising. She beamed with pride. See, she said to Dad. Told you Jake just needed the right tools. He started posting screenshots of his projects on Instagram, raking in likes, DMs, even a couple of scholarship offers. People praised his depth and originality. Teachers fawned over him, some even asking him to mentor other students in coding. I watched it all from the sidelines, furious, helpless. If I spoke up, I'd be accused of jealousy. If I stayed quiet, I'd watch him build a future out of the pieces he stole from me. But the worst part? Jake wasn't careful. He didn't understand file permissions, metadata, encryption. He didn't know that I'd set traps, small digital fingerprints inside every important project. Watermarks in the code. Invisible authorship tags in the documents. He thought he'd outsmarted me. He hadn't. All I had to do was wait for the right moment. Jake's rise wasn't meteoric. It was parasitic. He didn't build a reputation. He leached one. And like all parasites, he fed off a host, me, until I started to wither. It started with whispers. Teachers who used to praise me now looked right through me. One even said, during a discussion, let's hear from someone new today, someone like Jake, who's shown real growth lately. That phrase stuck with me like a thorn. Real growth? From Jake? He was recycling my work, my essays, my projects, my lines of code, and wrapping them in the shiny foil of fake ambition. And people bought it. His social media exploded with clout posts about his journey, complete with screenshots from projects I had written late at night, bleary-eyed, while he was out partying. Teachers started inviting him to panels. One even asked him to be a student speaker at an academic conference. Jake, who once Googled how do APIs work an hour before a quiz, was now waxing philosophical on digital ethics using a speech I'd drafted for a scholarship essay. The more he rose, the more I vanished. One afternoon, I was called into the internship office for a meeting with my supervisor. She had a printed email in front of her. We received a complaint, she said without emotion. One of your documents matched a public submission elsewhere online. The dates are close enough that it's under review. I saw the project name. It was mine, an environmental tracking app I'd built and submitted as a final assignment. But Jake had uploaded it to a GitHub under his name, 2 days earlier. You didn't happen to collaborate on this, did you? She asked carefully. No, I said, jaw tight. That's my work. She didn't argue. But she didn't defend me either. We'll have to put a pause on your recommendation until this is resolved. That word again. Pause. A soft way of saying, maybe never. It was the first domino. Then came the rejection letters, from universities, competitions, and tech mentorships. They all sounded similar, concerns over content originality. Thank you for your interest, but... Jake, meanwhile, was thriving. He launched a blog, Jake's Tech Talk. It featured his tutorials, copied word for word from mine. The posts were peppered with emojis, GIFs, and quirky asides he definitely didn't write. He monetized it. Made ad money. Got sponsorship offers. One startup even invited him to be a beta tester. They sent him a hoodie and $250. It arrived at our house with my GitHub handle printed on the return label. I stared at it for a long time before tossing it in the back of my closet. At school, the teachers who once mentored me now gravitated toward Jake. My computer science instructor told me he was impressed with Jake's blog and suggested I consider being more outgoing, maybe even ask Jake for help promoting my work. I almost laughed. Ask Jake. For help. At home, it was worse. Sharon walked around like she was managing a prodigy. Framed certificates went up on the walls. She signed him up for early campus visits and told friends at church that he was already building a startup. Dad bought into it. Hook, line, and sinker. I always knew Jake had it in him, he said one night while we ate dinner. You can't teach charisma. That boy's a natural. It was like watching someone forge a better version of you, and have the world celebrate it. But Jake wasn't careful. He got sloppy. Cocky. He didn't understand file metadata. He didn't realize that my documents were embedded with invisible authorship tags. That the code he copied contained lines of personal notes written in my shorthand. That my photos were timestamped and geotagged. That my essays used a custom formatting style I'd built into my word processor. One day, I found a folder on my desktop. Named Jake's Portfolio. He hadn't even tried to hide it. Inside were copies of nearly every major project I'd created over the last 2 years. He'd renamed the files, deleted the version history, and started attaching them to college applications. 3 days later, I got a message from a university I'd dreamed about for years. Rejected. The reason? Submission raises concern over originality. I nearly broke the keyboard. He wasn't just stealing from me. He was dismantling me. Piece by piece. My identity. My credibility. My future. Jake thought he was winning. He thought he was clever. He had no idea that every time he copied something, he handed me the rope. And I was almost ready to pull it. Revenge, I realized, wasn't about theatrics. It was about calibration. Jake had spent months meticulously dismantling my credibility, my relationships, my future. He hadn't just plagiarized my work, he'd infected every space where my name once stood proudly. So I decided to make my revenge surgical. Measured. Elegant. Step 1 was silence. He needed to believe I'd given up. I played the role of defeated sibling flawlessly. I stopped reacting. I stayed off social media, stopped checking emails in shared spaces, even smiled weakly when Sharon bragged about Jake's blog traffic hitting 5,000 followers. Internally, I was building a data fortress. I spent 2 weeks gathering proof, every line of stolen code, every paragraph lifted from my essays, every project plagiarized. I wasn't just collecting evidence. I was building a legal-grade case. I used a tool called Git Inspector to pull timestamp logs from my code repositories. I ran text comparison software to visually show plagiarism overlap. I pulled metadata from every single original file and matched it against his versions. I even used screen recording software to simulate live walkthroughs of when I created each project, footage of me typing, scrolling, saving. For his blog thefts, I built a public archive of original drafts saved on Notion and Google Docs, with edit histories going back years. Then came the personal angle. Jake's arrogance was his weak spot. So I baited him. I left subtle files on my desktop labeled Draft V2 or Scholarship Rewrite to entice him. Each was actually embedded with dummy content, fake essays loaded with invisible tracking pixels and hidden watermarks. Sure enough, he copied too. Within 72 hours, I saw them uploaded under his name to a platform hosting a youth scholarship competition. The moment they went live, my script flagged them. The competition had a plagiarism policy so strict they blacklisted applicants for even one flagged submission. So I reported them. Anonymously. With attachments. Then I waited. But that was just the appetizer. The real demolition would happen during his scholarship panel interview. It was a joint Zoom call, combining the university board and an external review team from a well-known startup accelerator. Jake had been rehearsing for days, using lines I wrote in my own personal statements about ethical innovation, digital accessibility, and the human side of tech. I watched him mutter my thoughts into the mirror like they were his own reflections. So the night before the interview, I executed my final phase. His laptop was always open, unattended in the living room while he took his long showers. I plugged in a USB, one I'd modified to run a script that did 3 things. Opened the Jake's Career Suicide Google Doc in full screen. Synced his desktop background to a screenshot of my original submission folder, with file names clearly marked as mine. Silently emailed the entire folder to his listed academic references, the tech panel organizer, and our school's principal, with a brief, polite message from a throwaway account. Attached are files showing substantial evidence of academic misconduct by Jake, last name, involving direct plagiarism from a fellow student. All materials are timestamped, documented, and traceable. Further investigation is recommended. Then I logged out. Deleted the script. Ejected the USB. But the Google Doc. I left that open on his laptop, tucked under his Chrome tabs. Not too obvious. Just tempting enough for a curious interviewer to find. And I didn't stop there. The Google Doc wasn't just a collection of proof. It was a manifesto. It told a story, with side-by-side comparisons, metadata tags, screenshots of conversations where Jake bragged about stealing my work, and even Sharon's emails boasting to school officials about his creative genius. I included my own statement at the end. This work was stolen over the course of a year. It has cost me internships, scholarships, and my reputation. This document exists because systems fail to recognize the quiet ones who do the real work in silence. I don't want revenge. I want the truth to be louder than his lies. And then, finally, I changed the document's sharing settings to public. I set a timer. At 8:58 a.m., 2 minutes before his interview, it would switch from private to fully visible. Anyone with the link could open it. Anyone in the meeting who clicked Show All Tabs on his browser could read it. Anyone who received the email I sent with the subject line Urgent Academic Integrity Concern, Jake, last name, would find it waiting. And I made sure it would hurt exactly where it counted. His interviewers would see he wasn't just a liar, he was lazy, incapable of even stealing cleanly. His references would see that he risked their reputations. His mother, if she checked her inbox, would see her golden boy naked and flailing. And most of all, his school, the one he'd been bragging about conquering, would see him flagged, blacklisted, and exposed. I didn't just want him rejected. I wanted the bridge to collapse beneath his feet after he took the first step. Jake didn't explode right away. At first, he was eerily quiet. Like his brain couldn't compute what had just happened. Like if he didn't acknowledge it, maybe it hadn't really happened. But by nightfall, the storm came. He burst into my room without knocking, laptop in one hand, rage etched across his face. "What the hell did you do?" he screamed. I didn't look up from my screen. I gave people what they wanted. The truth. "You ruined me," he shouted, voice cracking. "Do you know what you've done? They're calling me a fraud. A plagiarist. My blog got taken down. The scholarship committee said I might be blacklisted. This was my future. Your future," I said calmly, "was built on my past." He lunged at my desk, knocking over my chair. "You think you're some kind of hero? You think this makes you better than me?" I stood, slowly. Looked him in the eye. "No. It just makes me me. Something you've never had the guts to be." That's when the denial turned to bargaining. Jake slumped into the chair, hands in his hair. "Look, man. Maybe we can fix this. I'll apologize. We'll say it was a misunderstanding. I'll give you credit, hell, I'll split the offers. We just have to make this go away." "You can't unsteal a reputation," I said. "Please," he whispered. "They're going to pull my admission. My mom's freaking out. My dad won't even look at me. Everyone's turning on me." He looked up, eyes red. "You're not like me. You don't want to destroy people." And he was right. I didn't. But Jake had destroyed me. Over and over again. In silence. In smiles. In applause that should have never been his. So I gave him silence. He stormed out, slamming the door. 15 minutes later, there was a knock. Not Jake. Dad. He stepped in slowly, holding a crumpled printout in his hands. One of the side-by-side comparisons from the document. His face looked older than I remembered. "I didn't want to believe it," he said. "Not Jake. Not all this." I didn't speak. He walked to my desk, set down the paper. "You tried to tell me," he added softly. "All those times I brushed you off. Thought you were jealous. Thought Jake was just misunderstood." He sat on the edge of my bed, staring at nothing. "I saw what they said in the report. Your essays. Your code. Even that app you made for the volunteer center, that was you?" I nodded. He looked crushed. "I failed you," he whispered. "As a father. I let someone walk into our house and erase you." And I cheered him on. For a long time, we just sat in the quiet. Then he said, "What do you need from me? What can I do?" And for the first time in years, I told him the truth. "Just see me." He nodded, and this time, I knew he meant it. In the days that followed, the noise died down. Jake retreated from the spotlight he'd stolen. His name slowly disappeared from newsletters, social media, scholarship boards. The invitations dried up. The followers moved on. Sharon tried to spin the story, but people weren't listening anymore. You can only cry, "Misunderstood genius," so many times before no one cares. And me? I didn't become famous. I didn't suddenly gain 1,000 followers or walk into a scholarship office to thunderous applause. There were no headlines. No public redemption. But what I did get, quietly, steadily, was return. My name, restored. My work, respected. My future, mine again. My father started asking questions. Real ones. About my projects. My goals. He sat beside me one afternoon while I explained a new app one was building. He didn't say much, but he stayed. And that meant everything. I didn't get justice in the way the world usually defines it. But I reclaimed something far rarer. Dignity. Integrity. Self. And as I sat there, typing lines of code that no one else would take credit for, I realized. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't destruction. It's erasure. Of the lies. Of the thieves. Of the voices that told you to shrink. So you can finally take up the space that was always yours. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, it helps more than you know. Subscribe and stick around for more true stories with twists, turns, and just the right amount of karma.